Now, before we talked about meta sensibilities, and I want to distinguish that again from regular sensibilities, where a sensibility is something that lets us interface with something that's in the world. So if there is a piano in front of me and I have a sensibility towards playing the piano, when I sit down and I have my fingers on the keys of the piano, it'll show up to me in a certain way that will allow for me to play a harmonious tune, more so if I had practiced than I hadn't, so I can build up that sensibility. And then we talked about meta sensibilities, where it's a sensibility that doesn't act on an object in the world, but acts on the sensibility itself. So I could have a meta sensibility to know when is the right time or right place to play a piano. For example, say I'm entering a hotel and I see a piano to the right, and me being a piano player, I walk over and I start playing it. Then someone comes over and tells me, no, you can't play that right now because it's not for you. Having kind of the awareness to know when it's appropriate to play the piano is a meta sensibility. Now, the perceptive listener would think, well, why not having meta sensibilities, where you have a meta sensibility that acts on a meta sensibility? So knowing the awareness of when I'm playing the piano, I can have the meta sensibility of whether I should even consider playing the piano at all. And the answer is really there really is no reason, and that might be why it's so complex to think about what ought we do in certain situations. There's multiple actors that are contending to answer your question of whether you should or should not do that thing that you're thinking about. Something that comes to mind is Marvin Minsky's idea of the society of mind, where there's not one kind of conscious actor that is your brain that is telling you what to do, but there's many different actors that are competing for one another or work together in a way where each is kind of isolated towards doing one certain thing. Nietzsche also has a concept like this called drives, where again, the self is not necessarily a single self, but a combination of different drives. And whatever drive is kind of leading at a certain moment determines how you act. He kind of, or maybe a good metaphor for it would be people in a play. You have different actors with different personalities, and at any one moment in time, one is at the center of the stage. So this concept of meta sensibility actually brings us towards an idea of identity, which is, how do you think of yourself? Are you kind of a singly directed person who determines all the decisions, or are you kind of more of a bundle of different actors or drives or meta sensibilities? And at any one given time, you're kind of a slightly different person. And if that's the case, what is kind of the thing that unifies all of those meta sensibilities? And if we look at the different ideas of identity back in I believe the 18th century with John Locke and David Hume, you have two separate theories. You have the Lockean theory called the ego theory. And what he says is that the self is, as long as you can kind of remember a contiguous set of memories that brought you to this place in time, that is what corresponds to yourself. So if you got really drunk last night and you don't remember where you were and you did some things, Locke would say you're actually not responsible for those things. Hume, on the other hand, says there really is no idea of the self. It's kind of a metaphysical concept. The only things we can really understand are things in the world. I've never encountered a thing that has identified itself as the soul or the self, and I've been able to perceive it through my senses. So we can't really say that a self exists. If you look into it, if you use a rational mind and reason to look into yourself, all you really see is a bundle of perceptions or sensibilities. So that's a lot. We went all the way from meta sensibilities to the concept of identity, but I think that's an interesting thing to think about. For the time being, I think I'll continue relating the concept. We started with sensibilities, and we've kind of gone a little bit down the road towards some other topics, and we'll try to keep that road a little bit straight so we don't go off too tangential to different concepts that really aren't relevant to the previous things we talked about, but we'll see where it brings us.